Russians continue to flee abroad after President Putin's military call-up. Traffic has been heavy along the border between Finland and Russia. These land border crossings are among the few points for Russians seeking entry into the rest of Europe after multiple Western nations shut off their airspaces to Russian planes in response to the Ukraine war. Many have been trying to leave the country after President Putin announced a partial military mobilization of 300,000 troops on Wednesday. Border guards say the number of Russians entering Finland has doubled from last week, and Finnish authorities are looking at ways to reduce transit from Russia. On the ground in Ukraine, voting is underway in 4 Russian-occupied regions as Moscow holds referendums on joining Russia. Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhzhia represent around 15% of Ukrainian territory. And the referendum is part of the Kremlin's plans to justify the annexation of these regions. And John Gambrell joins us live from Kyiv with more details. John, how are these referendums being conducted? For example, is voting compulsory?
That's the really interesting question. Now, the Russians are trying to portray this as an open referendum where anyone can vote. Their state media has put out images of people standing in line, waving Russian flags, others under umbrellas in the rain, waiting for their chance to vote. But on the international community and with the Ukrainians, it's an entirely different story. From the Ukrainian side today, we've heard from at least one official who accuses Russia of sending armed troops out with people going door to door trying to get people to vote. And those who vote no on the referendum are being marked down in a ledger. Now, this official also claims that the Russians are also looking for military-age men to possibly conscript and use, as he described, as cannon fodder in the ongoing conflict. The West has called this election a sham, saying it resembles the 2014 annexation of Crimea, which also was internationally criticized. And this also comes as President Vladimir Putin has said that he's willing to even use nuclear weapons to stop the West and stop Ukraine. And Putin may consider these new territories as part of Russia, raising the risk of escalation as this conflict goes on.
And John, if there's sufficient truth in these allegations, this referendum, therefore, in large part, can be seen as, quote, a sham, and therefore a way of Moscow finding justification for annexation. Given that many might perceive it that way on the ground, how likely is this vote to impact what's happening on the ground 7 months into war?
That's really the most important question of all. As we said earlier, Putin has really put this forward as an idea that this territory is Russian to try to raise the risk, try to make the West think twice about arming Ukraine with these long-range weapons that they've used with great success to target the Russian positions that are far behind the front lines. They also want to try to carve out and make permanent the gains that they've made in occupying territory that's Ukraine. But the international community so far seems to be willing to back President Zelensky and the Ukrainians, sending weapons, saying that they find the election to be a sham, and continuing to acknowledge that in places that Russia has occupied previously, like the city of Izium, which the Ukrainians just took back, that there were human rights abuses, people tortured, people extrajudicially killed. So it does seem moving forward that the West and the Ukrainians will continue to fight. And the real question is, as Moscow tries to call up these some 300,000 additional troops, is just how much longer this war is going to go on and just what risks Vladimir Putin is going to take to try to cement these gains in the territory he's already taken from Ukraine.
Thanks. That John Gambrell reporting live to us there from Kyiv.